sometimes it's scary. You cannot be a silverfish and you want to hunt a shark. It will swallow you up. So you have to know, where do I stop?
Where did the dream for you becoming a journalist begin from?
Journalism has always been part of me. I think it began with a passion for radio. Even throughout my S4 holiday, Senior 6 holiday, I love radio up to now. Actually, people think that I am very good on TV, but if you give me a console and you give me a microphone right now, I would do a very great show. So I still have very, very, deep passion for radio. So I used to admire. There's a lady called Lady Bizo. She's called Becky. I think right now she does work in Kigali, Rwanda,
Okay.
but she worked for Kampala FM, later on went to Bob FM. She
The all
did-
country radio station.
Yes.
Yes.
Lady Bizo. Then she went to Hot 100. Very vibrant lady, full of energy, and she has a wide smile. I miss her so much. She's right now in Kigali, Rwanda. She's, I think, working where Jackie Lumbasi used to work.
Yes.
In Kigali, one of the big stations there. I used to admire her so much. So this time I get, when I was young, Senior 6 vacation, I moved to Kampala FM and I didn't have any appointment. I didn't know no one.
Just wait.
So I just went and I said, I'm here to meet Becky. And they're like, do you have an appointment with her? I'm like, no. And she was on air. There used to be a station manager called Ronnie. I think right now Ronnie works with Fanero. So he asked me, why are you here? I'm like, I'm here to see Becky. And I don't have any appointment, but she was on air. After the show, she's like, okay, how can I help you? I'm like, well, I admire you. I love your energy on radio, in front of that mic. Like, I really want to be like you. And she's like, oh, really? I'm like, and I want to see the studio and maybe you host me on one of your shows. This young man
With energy
with
and
energy doesn't know
enthusiasm.
what, just my passion just took me there. I didn't have no appointment, but I just went. So she talks to Ronnie and Ronnie said, yes, please come. And I came the next day. First time seeing a studio, seeing the microphone, the console, and she's doing intros and outros and she's energetic. And I'm like, wow, this is just amazing. How do you do it? So she started to coach me, voice coaching, pronunciations. How do you do intros? How do you do mid cues? How do you do outros? How do you manage the console?
Okay.
And so one day turned in 2 days, 3 days, a week, a month. I started to do the show together. And
Sure, you became a co-host.
Yeah, I did a show with her, I think, for about 2 months. As life went on, I got a slot at Magic 100 FM as a volunteer. Started doing a show called the Sunday Breakfast Show. It was a big show on radio on Sunday. We would do gospel music and, share the word. And it was just deep show from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. An opportunity came and they were looking for someone to fill up the position. I'm like, I've been volunteering, so just put me on payroll.
Yeah.
They said, no, you have to do interviews. And I remember I was there with Daniel Kanyere's Irish and the big names in the radio industry at that time. As I said, little known, no one. So we went into this boardroom. By then there was Mugisha Mugasa on UBC. Magic 100 FM was one of the radio stations for UBC. So they had blue, red, Magic 100 FM, green channel, So I reached there and Mugasa was like, I have a slot for TV. Would you take it if I gave it to you? I'm like, so part of me is thinking it's an interview.
New beginnings.
So the person is telling you that maybe they want to throw you off to see if you're focused. When you go for those interviews, you are so scared for what people are asking
The
you.
anxiety.
You look, the anxiety, but also you look at it as like, are they trying to trick me? And, you have to answer, you're nervous. And so I said, yes, I'd love to. So he told me, stand there and report Mabida is burning. I had never reported on TV. I don't know nothing. He said, start to report. Mabida is burning. I don't know anything. I hold the microphone and I start talking. Mabida is burning. Mabida is burning.
Like a poetry session.
Yeah, I imagine you've never done it. I'm like, my villa is burning, my villa is burning. Police trucks are beginning to arrive. A, B, C, D, E, F, G. After that, when the words were done, I kept quiet and I looked. And he's like, are you done? I'm like, yes. And he's like, no, you didn't sign out. He's like, when you sign out UBC. So I said, Solomon Serwanja, UBC News. Then he said, okay, good. We'll come back to you after a week. So I moved out. But when I moved out, I got so scared. So I grew up with my grandmother. And I went to my grandmother and told her, Granny, I don't think this one is for us.
It was a heavy day.
I went for a radio interview. This person turned it and told me TV.
Television interview.
1 week in, I get a call from the HR, and the HR said, we have your appointment letter here as a news reporter on UBC TV. I was like, what? I told Granny, oh God, we got a job for TV, yeah.
She's like asking for a slice and the loaf is here.
I know, right? Because I was going for radio, and then on Monday went picked my appointment, and boom, I started doing TV. So I met the legendary Rose Bukirwa. We call her Mommy many of us who have gone through her. She receives me with open hands, and she shows me how to do a script, how to do voicing. Already I had a voice from radio, so it was easy for me to get in front of the microphone and voice my script. They showed me how to be on camera, to report. Long story short, I started doing the news at 1 o'clock, UBC at 1. I also, at that time, got an opportunity of doing UBC Tonight. But that time I was so aggressive because, there were senior people in the newsroom and I had to fight my way up. I would do stories every day. I would try to go for the difficult stories that everyone fears. I would do piece to cameras every day on UBC so that, the world gets to see this new boy on the block. Then, boom, NTV called. I go to NTV, they were doubling my salary.
Wow.
And
I like that fact.
Got an opportunity to get into this big newsroom. The country's biggest newsroom. We had Maurice Mugisha, Farida Nakazipwe, the Frank Walusimbis, big names, Maurice Ocho, Senkandwa, Josephine Karunji, Rachel Mwine, like all those big names. And I come into this newsroom, Sudil Berhanga, Omusambaganya Bubeka Luboa, Julius Senkandwa, all the newsroom at the time, Gabriel Epenu. Yeah, I start, and I knew that it was even going to be hard because these were big names and I had to make sure that I do good journalism.
What was it like finding your bearing from, what you say is now the public or national broadcaster, and now you're into this big newsroom? It
was difficult. I mean, you're starstruck, first of all, because, you're standing next to Maurice Mugisha. Farida Nakazwe says, let's go for lunch, It has, first of all, sink in. Frank Walusimbi, this is a big, I'm like, okay. So, and then I'm like, okay, I am here and I have to work. If I am going to find my place in this newsroom, I have to work. So I came in, I'm like, I'm going to make sure that I file a story every day. And my magic was going for the difficult stories. I would do analysis. There would be a story number 1, which is an event. And, NTV used to have story number 2 has to be contextual. So you go and interview the professors from different universities, then analysts. So I would sort of go for that. And people didn't want to do that story of context and analysis. So I would go there. And so if there was a big story, I would make sure I would be in the first segment. The first 3 stories, I have to be there. And I had to do stories and have a piece to camera. So I would make sure, if they say, who wants to do this? I'm like, I'm available. So I made sure I was available at any point. I had to be aggressive because I had to find myself a space, a little slot in that newsroom, which was tight and competitive. I somewhat got the eye of the editor, William Scato, who, by the way, is a man I celebrate so much in my entire journalism career. He put me through fire.
I remember something you said that, you come in, you've been anchoring, and he tells me, Solomon Jakama
Jakamba Suti. That guy at the time saw something in me. So he called me to his desk and told me, "We Serwanja saga bintu byakwe sasira. Wano inokola." I'm like, "Yes, sir." So I told him I'll be available. So, and he was an assignments editor. So I would make sure that you come into the morning newsroom meeting, come up with ideas, brainstorm them. And I made sure that I would sit next to him so that, I get a story, a slot in the first segment, and I would do it with passion. For example, I would go to media center, but the story wouldn't stop there. I would call for an analysis. I would call the graphics people at office, do me these graphics. I would make sure I would get context. I would make sure I would call, on most of my stories, I would call Peter Mwesige. Say, Peter, I'm doing this story, but as a viewer, what would you want to see? What extra thing would you want me to do? So I would come up with a solid story. And I started to do stories and started to get noticed. I started winning awards. And, there's a time then I became the journalist of the year. I think that night was my biggest night. I got 7 awards plus the Big Nile Special Award. I don't know if you remember we used to win those awards together. And before I knew it, I started doing a bulletin called 7 Days. Started anchoring it. It was a pre-recorded show, so I would do it. And then got on to NTV at 1, did it. And then somehow I got into NTV Tonight. I did Weekend Edition, sometimes when Roxana wasn't around. And then I started a bulletin called NTV District Edition. Would anchor news from the districts. Fast forward, King Karisa sees me and says, "Why don't you come?"
Crossover.
And I crossed over to NBS and started to do journalism, did, investigations. My passion for investigative journalism started at NTV. And I did really great work there. I did a story called Taken and Never Returned, which was about the legal adoption and guardianship business. Lawyers would go to villages, take pictures, put them online. So people in the West would come, select, and then they forge papers and use the lacuna in the law and put kids up for adoption. So I followed this one case study in Mukono. It was a big story that actually ended up in contributing to the amendment of the Children's Act. Right now, it's very difficult for you to adopt a kid, but because of that story that I did.
Impactful.
So yeah, I come to NBS and we start the investigations desk and, started doing investigations, did story after story, took on the NBS Live at 9 with Ruxana. We did it, and then later on they separated us. I paired with my mate, Mebo Twegumiezake. Did Live at 9 together for so many years, won so many awards. I think I counted last week, I had 48 awards.
Wow.
Both national
Must be having
and international.
a decorated living room.
So many, so many of those, yeah. And then time came, left the newsroom and started the African Institute for Investigative Journalism together with
There's
colleagues.
the BBC award that you win.
Yeah,
It sort of kind of now opens a new chapter in your life
yeah,
where you now go full throttle with investigative
Yeah.
journalism.
yeah.
Tell us about that and what it had and the impact it had on your career.
Yeah, so firstly, I think I had an opportunity of pitching to the BBC a story called Stealing from the Sick. And it was quite a big story. It costed us a lot of money to do that story. It was exposing how medicines got lost. I mean, you go to national medical stores, they tell you you've released medicine. You go to hospitals, they say we don't have medicine. So someone wanted to find out what really went on in the middle there. So we did this big story with my colleague Godfrey and Kasim. Worked together with the, legendary producer Andy Bales from the BBC. And it was an amazing piece of work. Story was aired in Parliament. I think the first time an investigation was aired in Parliament. Parliament debated it, sent it to the Health Committee to investigate the findings. It was an amazing story.
An amazing story that also got you into.
Were tipped that there were a group of people who were buying government drugs illegally. An operation was carried out and we arrested 3 people while buying classified drugs and another 2 later.
Got me and my family and my guys who I did the story with in trouble. Yeah, it was, it had also its dark side. But yeah, I think that comes with the risk of doing investigative journalism. But after that, I won the BBC World News Komla Dumor Award, which I think it was a great award, and it's given to award excellent journalism on the African continent. And it's not really about the story alone. I think they consider so many things. But it was such a life-changing moment for me, having been recognized by the BBC World News. Went to London, spent some time there, rubbed shoulders with some of the big names in the journalism space globally. And while there, I'm thinking to myself, okay, I've had this time in the BBC, and a lot of the times you would love the BBC to retain you and you want to stay in London. But out of the people who had won that award, only Nancy had stayed in London. Many of them have to go back. I mean, one of the things is that go back and share what you've learned and go and share it with your newsrooms. So I came back with this, what more can I do? I mean, I felt like I had done everything else. And I said, look, let me just start an entity that is supposed to give back to journalism and grow the next generation of journalists. Especially as senior journalists left the newsroom, I felt like there was a gap that we needed to fill. So we incorporated the African Institute for Investigative Journalism, which really had about 4 core programming, which is training and capacity building, sharing what we had amassed over the last 15 years of our careers to young reporters in the newsroom, supporting them really to do investigative journalism, because it's a different niche. It's expensive, it's risky. So anyone who wants to go into it has to be ready and know the price of doing investigative journalism. So we started also thinking of grant-making program where we give out small grants to journalists to do stories, because many of the newsrooms, I mean, you have a good story, but you don't have resources to actually do it.
Yeah,
so we come in to sort of support that. And also we started a program called collaborative reporting, where we would love to get a reporter from the Daily Monitor, pair them with the New Vision and NTV, and maybe someone in Bukedia, or maybe Mighty Fire FM in Kitgum, and together do a big mind-blowing investigation. And it has been work in progress. We have made significant progress, but we are not yet there. But we will dream that one day we will do a big blockbuster investigation. I mean, Edgar, one of the biggest investigations that have been in this world has been out of collaboration. I mean, think about the Panama Papers, the Pandora Papers, the HBS scandal. Journalists from different countries coming together to do one big blockbuster. And so that is I pray that before I die, that I am able to pull off a national big investigation that is out of collaboration with different journalists from different newsrooms, radio, TV, newspapers, online, together to do a big story.
From where you sit and the work that you do is holding those in power accountable, actually. What's the price that you've paid or you're paying for this?
So firstly, I do this through 2 main things. One is investigative reporting. So I do investigations. Even after I've left the newsroom, I felt like I was really bored doing admin work, like being an executive director, putting on suits and, So I said, no, I have to actually go back and do some journalism, at least two stories a year, I mean, what does it mean to be called an investigative journalist and you don't do investigative stories? You're a doctor, but you don't practice anymore. There's something that comes with it. So I said, I'll dedicate at least half of my time at the Institute to do investigative journalism. So I've, really done big stories, including, the ghosts of Untungamu that exposed ghost health centers, abducted and tortured that exposed how people are being abducted and tortured, targeted that really focused on how journalists were beaten and battered during elections, I've done an investigation on Zoka, how people are depleting the forest, so many different investigations. So every year I at least do 2 investigations. But I also started a show called The Hard Questions Show. The show really was supposed to hold the powerful to account, the people in power, and asking them those uncomfortable questions. I think that the show has grown. It has now an average viewership of about 500,000 views across social media platforms. The show also airs on NBS TV twice a week. And I think it's doing amazing. We've hosted so many big guests. We celebrated 2 years recently. And it's fascinating that you invite, people in power, and they come and you ask them uncomfortable questions and they're happy to answer and they come back.
Sometimes unhappy.
Sometimes they're unhappy. I think one of those episodes is just, I think one of my favorite episodes of that show is the one that we did with the Honorable Keloriem. It was amazing. It was pound per pound, But yeah, it has come with a responsibility. I think that we have a moral responsibility as journalists to hold our leaders accountable. So many people want to be in the chair you're in or get an opportunity of asking these questions, but they don't get that opportunity. And I think that when we have these people in power sit on the other side and we don't do what the public expects us to do, then we have not done our core duty of being watchdogs to hold the powerful to account. I think that as journalists, we don't have the luxury of nursing egos and praising people. I think that we have the responsibility of putting the feet of the people in power to the fire and ask uncomfortable questions and present overwhelming evidence for them to be able to respond to those questions. And I think that's what journalism is about. That's what the Hard Questions Show is about, where we say, look, this did not go right, this did not go well. You need to answer and tell people about this. And it's one form of investigative journalism. We're used of doing investigative journalism by doing long packages or long write-ups. But investigative podcasts, investigative interviews is one form of investigative journalism. And it's really been a rough ride. There's times that you're threatened, calls come. There's times that they do campaigns against you and you visibly see them online. The people will abuse you. And I would be naive to say that some of those, campaigns that are online that are targeting me don't shake me. They do. I would be lying to you that they don't. They do. But sometimes you go back to that safe space and say, okay, is what I'm doing right? Or am I making a contribution? And that makes you wake up the next day to keep doing what you do.
Speak to the genre or bit of journalism that you speak to, and also give us a sense of the new guy coming into the newsroom. What nuggets are they that you're trying to pass on to them from the legacy that you built as a journalist?
My passion is in investigative journalism. This is what I've known for the last 15 years of my career. And I think that investigative journalism, just one story a year, can have a radical shift and impact in how we run this country. I mean, think about some of the biggest investigations that have been released by the Daily Monitor, by the New Vision, by NTV, by NBS, by the Media House. It takes time. Investigative journalism takes time to do. It takes resources. It may take you one whole year and you're chasing one story, but when it's out, it has big impact, more than the so many stories that have been done on press conferences. Or the genre of investigative journalism is anchored in evidence. It's not in allegations. You must have hardcore evidence that backs up your allegations, and that makes it a fact. A number of facts equal to a truth. And investigative journalism is about having that evidence that builds up to a fact. And so many facts give you the truth, and therefore you present the truth and ask for feedback. So investigative journalism is not long-form journalism or feature journalism. Some people do long features and they call them investigations. So investigative journalism has tenets. What really makes a good investigative story? Investigative journalism is like research. You must have a title. You must have research questions or hypothesis. You must show the methodology of how you're going to actually answer those questions and present evidence. Go to the field, collect the data, analyze it, present the facts, and give us your conclusion. That's investigative journalism. It's pretty much like research. If you are making an allegation that someone stole money, you have to be able to prove it. You either want to use secret filming, you either want to use open source intelligence, you either want to have a document that has facts. And then when you bring all those things together, you have overwhelming evidence that that person, that puts you in a place to say that this person is a thief. So we go beyond, oh, I interviewed the other person and said that he was a thief. No. It's hardcore evidence.
Go beyond the lawyer.
It's going beyond that person making allegations. So for those who are interested in investigative journalism, you must have evidence. You must have like several pieces of evidence that can incriminate that person. There's a guy called Anas Arimio Anas. And one of his core strategies of getting evidence is secret filming. And then baiting. You know, he gives you a bait, you take it, he secretly films you and puts you out. Of course, that has been...
You're one of the few people in the world who know what his face looks like.
Yeah, I've actually met him once. Yeah, but I mean, I interviewed him recently on the show and it was really amazing. He's one of the most celebrated journalists of our time. I mean, people like John Allan Namu, you know, big name in Nairobi and on the African continent. I really respect him for the effort he has put in. He started African Censored, has done an amazing piece of work in investigative journalism. Really, really, really groundbreaking investigations by him and his team. And I think that he deserves our appreciation. But all of these people who are doing investigative journalism have principles or cores that guide us when we are doing investigative journalism. Is it the truth? And what is equal to the truth? Do you have the facts? Do you have the evidence? And can we actually give the other person an opportunity to speak to those truths? I think it's called the right of reply. So when you're doing an investigation, give the other person a right to reply. I have had so many stories that we have declined to publish because we haven't gotten a right to respond, and we give it 3 months. So we write to you, we call you, we say, okay, we have tried and we have failed. For me, that is what investigative journalism is about. An investigation must have multiple sources. You must speak to so many people because you're looking for facts. An investigation must be tied up, loose ends. For every story that you do, must be in public interest. How many people are affected? What is the potential impact? You must also do risk assessment. You cannot be a silverfish and you want to hunt a shark. It will swallow you up. So you have to know, where do I stop? Even if you're a Nile perch, you can't hunt a shark. You have to stop somewhere and say, okay, I can't go beyond this point. Maybe if I get a tiger shark, maybe a whale, it can take it on from here.
And size it up.
And size it up. So you have to know, where do you stop? Where do you start and stop? So risk assessment is important. If you think that the story is so risky, don't do it. If you do and evaluate and say, this story is so risky to do, cut the plug and say, I'm out. Or you can do your story and say, I reached to this point and this is where I stopped. So to the new young journalists in the newsroom who are passionate about investigative journalism is rewarding, it's impactful. You'll do a story and see lives change. You say do a story and, laws are changed. You make a contribution, even when that contribution comes at a very big risk. Again, there's no story worth your life, so you have to calculate the risk. And if you think that you can take up the risk, then do it. And that's one of the things that we're now doing at the Institute. We are creating a center where people can come and take refuge for a second. You do a story, it's all over, they're hunting located? You. They're hunting you down, and I just want to shelter you for a week and say, you know what, first stay here and breathe, and just calm down. Many of the newsrooms, they judge journalists. We have this famous story in the newsroom or this famous saying in the newsroom that says, you're as good as your next story. I think it's important for newsrooms to start caring about the journalists who do their big stories. They put their lives on the line, they put their names on the line, you sell your copies, but it's important that you pay attention to their safety and security. You should be interested in how that person is. There are newsrooms that decide to take you out. I know, for example, a colleague who did a very sensitive story was taken to Oslo for close to a year as things were coming down. How many of those newsrooms are able to do that? Many of the journalists who do these stories, you come back to the newsroom and say, what story are you working on? I think that newsrooms and editors need to pay attention to the security of their reporters. It is paramount. But beyond just their security, their mental health. You do a story, you output an investigation, the next day you have a lot of paranoia. You don't know, you're with your kids in the car and someone says, come in that, and then moves away on a border, and then you're thinking, okay, what is going on?
You're worried. Something worrying about what is it that they are signaling to you. And you talk about family. How do you balance it up at the end of the day so that they don't miss you? Because you partly do this for the good of your family.
That is a very hard question. And I must be honest, sometimes it's scary. Sometimes you're having dinner conversations with your family and you're thinking, okay, how far can I go? How much is too much? Sometimes they tell you you've done it all, you have been awarded, you have done all these stories. You are one of the most celebrated journalists globally, and you've made your contribution. Just come home, be a daddy, be a husband. But and when you look at sometimes, the risk that you put your family in, sometimes it can be real, and however strong you are or a giant you are, usually their family is the only currency that is worth fighting for. So sometimes you just have to make decisions putting them in thought. It's not about you only. It's not about you only. It's not about your passion. It's not only about your dreams. You've got to think about them. You have to put them in context. If I'm doing this story, where will it leave me? Where will it leave my family? If I'm doing this, you sort of have to think about them. It's very selfish for us as professionals to only think about us and not think about them, because they are but just part of us. We can no longer do things like we used to do them when we are single, when we had nothing to lose, when I think we've gone through that time. But when we get married, get a wife, you're no longer alone, you have a wife. When you get kids, you now even have an extra layer to think about. So there's been times where I've made decisions not to take up some assignments because of my family, because of the risks that it exposes them, especially that they have been exposed before. So even with the passion to do investigative journalism, I have to think twice about some of those stories. To be honest, they are but just part of us, and we have to think about them.
What's on your wish list?
I want investigative journalism to grow because I believe in its power. I want newsrooms to start desks and allocate budgets to do investigative reporting. I wish that genre of journalism keeps growing in the newsroom, not to only pay attention to the business. I've been in the newsroom long enough to know that there are investigations that have been sacrificed at the altar of business. And that is bad, Calls are made from the top floor and business owners infiltrating the editorial policies to decide what stories go out. There's so many journalists who have done stories, superb investigations or superb stories that never see the light of day because we have a business to run. My wish is that investigative journalism grows. It was started by our forefathers in the industry. We need to make a contribution to it, but also pass it to the next generation, so that the newsroom is not a place only where stories are collected, but where stories are interrogated, where answers are questioned, where evidence is collected, so that we go beyond what the people we are interviewing are telling us to expose what they are not telling us for the good of the audience. So that's my wish. My wish is that we continue to do those, hard-hitting stories anchored in evidence, not only here in Uganda, but across Africa. My wish is that this genre of journalism never dies and that we pay attention to it. And I'm happy that this genre of journalism is going beyond the newsroom. Before, investigative journalism was just being done in the newsroom. Right now, we have different channels now. We have AIIJ doing investigative journalism. We have Agora doing investigative journalism. We have Africa Uncensored. We have investigative journalism now, not only left to the confines of the newsroom, but now it's out there. People are starting podcasts where they are, investigating some of these things. Really, my dream, or what I would really love to see in the next future, that this genre of journalism is strengthened.